What's up, everybody? It's Jordan, and welcome to the Sports Suit Hine Show. Yesterday, there were so many moves during free agency. Moves we expected, moves we did not expect. Several just kind of strange signings. There were some trades as well. There's been several of those today. We're going to be talking about some free agent targets for the Bengals, what the Bengals should be doing in free agency. Kind of the aftermath type of deal with Jesse Bates and Von Bell both leaving. Different things like that. Also, some moves across the NFL as well. We already kind of talked about yesterday how, Jermaine Pratt re-signed with the Bengals in a 3-year contract worth $21 million. This was just really crazy to me that Pratt signed for the Bengals at just this cheap. We were expecting him kind of close to be nearly double that per year. 3 for 21, 10.5 the first year. So he gets 10.5 in 2 years. That's just a remarkable deal by Cincinnati. He was talked about, when he re-signed with Cincinnati, he has really likes loyalty a lot. He'd rather be with a team with a winning team with a good quarterback than chase money and stuff like that. So that's, something good to see with Pratt. So like I said, we locked Pratt up on a 3-year deal. We lost Jesse Bates to Atlanta. Kind of talked about that on the show yesterday. On a 4-year deal worth $64 million, Bates is going to get $23 million in year one. That is ridiculous. I'm very, very glad the Bengals did not even attempt to re-sign Jesse Bates. It just did not seem like it was going to be worth it at all. But just the Von Bell signing to me, that's what kind of is really a head scratcher. That's one I'm really, really frustrated with. Von Bell signed with Carolina, and at the time yesterday when I did the video, it was not released what Von Bell's contract details were with Carolina. And holy crap, I just don't understand why the Bengals did not offer this. This is a freaking steal, honestly. This is such a steal to get Von Bell. The Carolina Panthers signed Von Bell to a 3-year deal worth $22.5 million. When you look at Von Bell, his cap hits for the next couple years. This upcoming season, he's going to be making $3 million. The following year, he'll be making $10.9. In the final year of his contract, he'll be making $8.4. So he has a $3 million cap hit this year. Von Bell does with Carolina. It's 11 next year and then 8.4 the following year. I just don't get why the Bengals did not re-sign Von Bell, especially considering you knew you were going to lose Jesse Bates. So when I was looking at the Bengals free agents, you would expect Von Bell to be really the priority free agent. Basically, you had to re-sign him because if not, you're screwed. And the Bengals are in a very crappy situation right now. Safety was, it was something that the Bengals, they needed to address in free agency, but you didn't really think they were going to address it big time because your initial reaction or your expectation was that the Bengals were going to re-sign Von Bell. Unfortunately, that was not the case. And it's going to be really interesting to see what the Bengals do now. Anarumo has said that there's several safeties, that they like and stuff like that. They have to sign an experienced safety. We'll talk about that, throughout the show and stuff. Let's see here. Thomas Clark, Taylor Rapp, or John Johnson III is who we need to take Bell's spot. Yeah, I agree with that. When I'm talking about that here in just a minute here, Taylor Rapp is somebody who I really think we as Bengal fans should be kind of maybe paying attention to more and talking about more. John Johnson, I would not mind him at all. But let's see here. Bell's contract structure is why we didn't get him. Yeah, and also with his guaranteed money on the 3-year deal is $13 million guaranteed on a 3-year deal. It's been well documented, and most Bengal fans know that the Bengals are not big fans of guaranteed money. When you look at the Bengals, when they were unable to re-sign Carl Lawson a couple years ago, the guaranteed money had a lot to do with it, and we ended up signing Trey Hendrickson instead. And the guaranteed money on Trey Hendrickson's contract was very, very low. So it's going to be interesting what maybe the Bengals offer when it came to guaranteed money on Bell and some of these other guys if they attempt to sign him or attempt to sign those players. But let's see here some interesting let's see moves today. There's not been as many moves today as there was yesterday, but looking at some of them here, really the kind of wowzer type of deal just kind of caught people by surprise, really shocked just so many people, is that Darren Waller got traded to the New York Giants. The Giants, they traded a third-round pick to the Raiders to get Darren Waller. The Giants, they got that selection by trading to Kadarius Toney to the Chiefs. So basically the New York Giants traded Kadarius Toney for Darren Waller. I would say that's a pretty good trade for the Giants. When you look at Kadarius Toney, did absolutely nothing for the Giants. Darren Waller is one of the better tight ends in the league. But when you're looking at this Raiders team now, like this Raiders team, I like the Garoppolo signing. I know it's an unpopular opinion. I think it's freaking genius. It makes so much sense to pair Garoppolo back up with Josh McDaniels. And I still think they're taking quarterback at 7. It would make so much sense too. And I like the idea of having Garoppolo be your bridge type of guy. You maybe start him a year or two, and then whoever your quarterback is, they would eventually take over within a year or so. But the Raiders, I mean, there's rumors that Devontae Adams went out. There's, they franchise tagged Josh Jacobs, and he did not want to be franchise tagged. You don't know what's going to happen with him. I've seen stuff. Maybe Josh Jacobs would get traded. I've said this a couple of times on videos. I know I've tweeted it a couple of times. If Josh Jacobs gets traded, to me, one team to watch out for would be the Dolphins. I know they re-signed Raheem Mostert, but I think the Dolphins makes a lot of sense because they love to run the ball. McDaniel was a run game coordinator for the 49ers. They use multiple running backs in their scheme. And when you look at Josh Jacobs, he played college with Tua and Jalen Waddle. There's multiple connections there. It makes a lot of sense, but we just don't know if Jacobs will get traded or not. I think C.J. Gardner-Johnson might be too much. Yeah, that's the thing to me. Like, I just don't get that because Von Bell's price was not bad at all. Honestly, it was way cheaper than I thought it was going to be. I thought he was going to get around maybe 9 or something like that, but I'm just very surprised he signed for so cheap. And I've said this, yesterday. I was just as surprised as Bell leaving as I was with Pratt staying. And when you look at Pratt's contract, you saved probably about $3 to $4 million per year by signing Pratt's contract to what you did. So that $3 or $4 million could have went towards Von Bell. The money that they saved on Jermaine Pratt's contract really should have went to Von Bell, and I just don't get why they did not choose to do that. That makes no sense to me. When you look at the top safety snaps the last 3 years, Bell and Bates are 2 and 3, and we lose both of them. I know Jesse Bates is not what he used to be, in my opinion. I mean, the first 3 years of his career, he had at least 100 tackles and 3 interceptions. He's had less than 90 each of the last 2 years. You can tell, to me, there's been a decline in play in Bates. Von Bell has played great. Von Bell was 100% the better safety this year, and you would have thought he would have got more money. You would have thought the Bengals would have prioritized him. But apparently, it just did not seem to be the case for Bell. Let's see here. Also, wouldn't mind grabbing Foster Monroe and drafting a tight end round 2. Tight end's really interesting because, I've done a couple of mock drafts, a couple of free agency simulators, and it's one of those deals. I've had a couple of people on. We've both discussed. It's kind of a domino effect. If this move happens, well, this move has to happen. And, let's say, there's different scenarios. If the Bengals don't set a tight end, they're going to draft one early. If the Bengals don't address safety, they're going to sign one and maybe draft one. If they sign Von Bell, you don't really have to worry about that. But there's so many scenarios. And I don't like to overreact about, free agency for the Bengals, but I know it's only been a couple of days. But Von Bell leaving is just so weird because now they kind of have to prioritize safety as their, top team need right now. They'd really be stupid not to. And, tight ends, obviously a position that they may look into to maybe upgrade, and maybe they will keep Hurst. But, even if they sign Hayden Hurst on a 1-year deal, I don't think that completely would rule out the Bengals drafting tight end in round 1 if Michael Mayer was there. To me, I feel like that'd be the only tight end they would consider in round 1 if they would re-sign Hayden Hurst. But there's just so many different scenarios, and it's going to be very, very interesting to see what they do. But, like I said, Darren Waller got traded to the New York Giants today. That was a really big surprise one. Taylor Heinicke signed a 2-year deal with Atlanta, up to $20 million. So with that contract, your expectations are he's probably going to start for the Falcons this season. I don't get why he signed for so much, and that's just kind of crazy to me. There's been multiple quarterbacks I've said I would like the Bengals to sign as a backup, but I feel like Gardner Minshew and I feel like Bridgewater are both better than Heineke. And if Heineke's getting 2 up to 20, I mean, Minshew and Bridgewater are probably going to have a big payday. But like I said, like on different videos, Atlanta, scheme-wise, is the closest team schematically to the Ravens. And I honestly thought they were going to maybe try to get Jackson, but I guess not. They're going to stick with Heineke, go with Heineke. That's a very, very interesting move there. Eric Hendricks signed a 2-year deal, 13 with the Chargers. Helps the linebacker core there for the Chargers. The Chargers were a team who had like no money about a couple of days ago, but they've restructured several other contracts to top players. I mean, Austin Eckler is requesting a trade. I feel like that should be talked about more. He's one of the best running backs in the league. I'd be very interested to see where he goes to. And I've seen some Bengal fans say, the Bengals should get him. That makes absolutely no sense at all. When you have Burrow, have Higgins, have Chase, you have Hendrickson, Reeder, Hubbard, Mixon, Boyd. You have all these guys who are going to be free agents soon. You can't add another marquee top talent player to that mix because, if you would trade for Austin Eckler, that basically rules out 2 more players you're not going to re-sign because if you trade for Eckler, you'd think you'd re-sign him. But Draymond Jones, he signed with Seattle 3 for 51. I feel like that's an extreme overpay there. I know there were some rumors and stuff like that talking about the Bengals were interested in him. I don't know how much truth there was to that. I don't think that would have made any sense though, because I'd much rather have DJ Reader, BJ Hill. Let's see here. Bobby Okereke signed a 4-year deal with the Giants, 4 for 40. Like I said, Waller with the New York Giants as well. Josh McDaniels gets another former Patriot coming to the Raiders. They sign Jacoby Myers in a 3-year deal worth $33 million. I like that deal a lot there for the Raiders. And to me, when you see Jacoby Myers getting signed by the Raiders, that kind of point signs that maybe Hunter Renfrow will be traded. When you look at the Raiders, they already traded Darren Waller, so nobody's really off the table at this point. I even think Devontae Adams, if there's the price is there, maybe they wouldn't trade him, which is just absolutely crazy. All of the stuff they traded for him last year, and they could maybe trade him this offseason. It's really, really crazy. One corner I've kind of talked about that I would not have minded the Bengals to sign, Emmanuel Mosley. He's a guy he's really, really good when he's healthy. He's just never healthy at all. He's played 5 years in the league. He's only had one season where he's played more than 12 games. So he's really, really injury prone, but he signed a 1-year contract with the Detroit Lions. And looking at the phone here, Samaje Perine signed a 2-year deal with the Denver Broncos. That sucks. To me, when you look at Perine, I'm not even going to lie. I wanted Perine cut last year. I did not think he was, worth, being a running back too. We would have saved the money by cutting him. But this past year, he was better than Mixon. Like, let's be honest. Perine, when he, got carries, he was much effective and better than Joe Mixon this season. And when you look at Joe Mixon having 1 year left on his deal, all the, allegations and crap like that's happened in the offseason, just different stuff, his poor play, saving $8 million post-June, after June 1st if they cut him, saving $2 million right now if they cut him. When you look at Joe Mixon, there's reasons to believe, there's cases to be made why Mixon could possibly maybe be cut. And you would think, regardless of Joe Mixon was cut or regardless of Mixon stayed on the team, you would think that Perine would stay on the team. Because, when Perine first came to the Bengals, Mixon was pretty much the main reason Perine was on the team. He was a guy who really never had a chance, a guy who really didn't do anything in the pros. And, he stayed on the team for a couple of years and slowly, got better year after year. But Perine to Denver is really interesting to me. When you start looking at Denver, I don't know how they're getting all this money. Like, they are spending a crap ton of money. They signed Ben Powers 4 for 52. They signed McGlinchey 5 for 87. They signed somebody else. I cannot remember who it is. But let's see. Perine to the Broncos, try to find what that contract was. Because, you're going to assume it's not high. Like, I'm going to say it's not more than 3, which at that point, just go ahead and keep him if you're the Bengals. Because P. Ryan played good this year. He was effective. He was obviously obviously the better blocker than Joe Mixon. He was better running than Joe Mixon. Let's see here. P. Ryan, a 2-year deal worth 7.5. At that point, I just don't know why you would not re-sign him. And that goes back to Jermaine Pratt, because the money you saved for Jermaine Pratt, you saved, like I said, $3.5 to $4 million on average per year with that Pratt signing, because the expectations were he was going to get 10 to 12. He got just barely over 7. That money could have went to P. Ryan and would have covered this year and next year. Or you could have had that money and could have went towards re-signing Von Bell. So, heading into the offseason, there were some people wanting Mixon cut. Some people want him to trade it. I can kind of see why people want Mixon to get cut. I'm not totally against it, but I'm not 100%, dead set for it. But now when you're looking at running back, you're going to have to draft one. I mean, with, Mixon getting a cut or not, you were probably going to draft a running back, maybe in the 5th or 6th round, something like that. But with Mixon 1 year left in this deal, P. Ryan is now gone, which honestly, that kind of surprises me too. I mean, you have P. Ryan and Bell, both to me, 2 guys I thought the Bengals would have resigned. Both of them are no longer in Cincinnati. It's very interesting, and you don't know what they're going to do. There was rumors about the Bengals when Jamal Williams. I just don't understand that. Because when you look at Jamal Williams, I would feel like the Lions would be they would want Jamal Williams to stay with the Lions. He's a locker room guy. He's a team leader and stuff like that. Him with Cincinnati would just be kind of weird. Like, I could not imagine the Bengals having Jamal Williams and Mixon. I know Jamal Williams had 17 rushing touchdowns last year, I believe, led the league in rushing touchdowns. But when you look at the yards to the amount, I think most of them were just like 1 or 2 yards, basically goal line touchdowns. But I don't know. That would be very interesting to see what to do there. But I don't think anybody possibly could imagine, just within 2 days of free agency happening, there's situations where Von Bell is no longer in Cincinnati. P. Ryan's gone, and we're talking now about the possibility of Jamal Williams coming to Cincinnati. It's crazy what just a couple of days can make. Isn't tomorrow the last day you can sign unrestricted free agents? I believe so. Yes. Let's see here. I'm surprised Sean Murphy Bunting hasn't been signed yet. I mean, that's a corner to me. Like, he's good, but I just don't feel like the Bengals will pay a decent amount of money for him, because if they didn't pay money for Von Bell, a guy who's been a team leader the past couple of years, I would not expect them to re-sign. I would not expect them to sign Sean Bunting Murphy here. Like, I just don't really understand why they would do that. But I don't know. When you look at Cincinnati, we've been talking about how safety is kind of a priority here for the Bengals. I mean, running back isn't like your top priority, but that's something that, in my opinion, has jumped up the list. I would say that's maybe position 3 or 4, but maybe it's jumped up a little bit now, so you don't know what they're going to do with running back. With P. Ryan gone, I would say the odds of Mixon getting cut are pretty much like 2% now. Like, I just don't see it happening now, which honestly, like, even if Mixon were to get cut, I would not have imagined it would have been around this time frame, because, like I said, they'd save $8 million if it was after June 1st. But with losing P. Ryan, that would be very surprising if the Bengals were to release Mixon. I could have saw a scenario if Mixon were to be released. They would have kept P. Ryan and maybe draft a guy who could possibly be their future starter. But it's very interesting with P. Ryan leaving for Denver. Also, some more, big signings here. I don't remember if I mentioned this one, but Alan Lazard signed a 4-year contract with the Jets, 4 for $44. Lazard had a career high in receptions last year. He had a career high in yards last year. And, there was a report of Rodgers having, a list of players that he would want to play with if, he went to the Jets. It was Lazard, Beckham, Mercedes Lewis, and Randall Cobb. I would be very surprised if Rodgers went to the Jets, but now it's kind of looking like it's a real possibility, because they already have Lazard. Mercedes Lewis is not going to cost hardly any money to them. They could just trade a late pick for Cobb. It'd be really crazy to see Rodgers on the Jets if it's actually happen. It's one of those situations where every single freaking year we're talking about Rodgers. Where is he going to play with? He's going to leave Green Bay. All this stuff. I'll be glad when this crap's over with. It's so frustrating. It's just the only thing people talk about during free agency the last 3 years. It's old. He's attention whore. He wants all the attention and stuff like that. Anytime he has a chance to get a news headline, he'll say crap or he'll be in the news and stuff like that. I'll be glad when this Rodgers stuff is over with because it'll give us something else to talk about. When you're looking at the Bengals, kind of going back to one of the first comments here, Taylor Rapp or John Johnson's who we need to take Bill's spot. Darian Harris, what's up? Hope we get Thornhill or John Johnson. I mean, either one of those guys would be very, very good. Let's see here. Some free agent targets for the Bengals. I feel like one guy, you already kind of mentioned Taylor Rapp. Taylor Rapp, to me, I feel like this should be talked about a little bit more. I know lots of people are kind of talking about maybe John Johnson or, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, but Taylor Rapp in the 4 years so far, he played with the Rams. He has 9 interceptions and 330 tackles. He could be really, really good with this Bengals team. He's a really fast guy. He has some, really explosive hits and stuff like that. He's great at, deflecting passes and everything. He'll get you a decent amount of interceptions. He's had at least 1 interception every single year that he's played. And with him playing with the Rams, some of the coaches that coach Taylor Rapp were some of the coaches that, Taylor used to coach with. So, maybe, those coaches can tell, Taylor about some, things about Rapp and, stuff like that. But he was a guy I liked a lot coming out of college. I would not mind at all if the Bengals ended up signing Taylor Rapp here in free agency. But it's just kind of wild when we're talking about now replacements for Von Bell. That's something we did not think we were going to be talking about just a day or so ago. One other player I really think people should be talking about more, and this makes a lot of sense to me when you're looking at the Bengals right now and when you're looking at safety. I do not understand why this guy is not being talked about more. Julian Love to the Bengals makes a lot of sense. Julian Love, when you're looking at him, he was, played for the Giants the past couple of years. He's played 4 years in the league. He's had 5 interceptions in his career. He has over 290 tackles, 13 tackles for loss. And when I look at players, signing with the Bengals and stuff like that, and, just, different players in general, like one of the reasons why I thought Garoppolo was going to sign with the Raiders is because of the connection with McDaniels. And when you look at Julian Love, the interesting thing about Julian Love, there is a connection with the Bengals and Love. When you look at the Bengals linebacker coach, James Betcher, he was the New York Giants defensive coordinator in the 2019 season. Julian Love was on the Giants roster that year. Julian Love was a rookie in 2019, and James Betcher, our linebacker coach, was the defense coordinator for the Giants that same season. So there's a connection there. Our linebacker coach, James Betcher, coached Julian Love with New York. And I've said this on a couple of different videos. I also thought the Bengals would maybe go after Clinton Farrell because the connection with Marion Hobby, our defensive line coach. When you start looking at the Bengals, team right now, and the connections with coaches and players prior to Cincinnati, it truly is kind of interesting. When you look at Zach Taylor and wide receiver Mike Thomas, when you look at Eli Apple and Lou Anarumo. Marion Hobby also coached DJ Reader when Reader was at Clemson. So there's several coaches in Cincinnati who have coached players who are on the team right now prior to their situations in Cincinnati. This could possibly be another situation, that happening with Julian Love coming to Cincinnati. Like I said, with the Bengals linebacker coach, James Betcher, coaching Julian Love with the Giants, him being defense coordinator for the Giants in the 2019 season. I really feel like he should be somebody who's talked about more. I'm going to be honest. I don't think we're going to get Jordan Poyer. I know that the name's kind of been thrown out there. I don't think we're going to get Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I feel like if we're looking at safeties right now, Julian Love is the one to look at. I think it makes a lot of sense. It's not being talked about enough. but he's not going to be a marquee name. He's not going to get a top dollar contract like some of those guys I just mentioned. And that's part of the reason why I think Julian Love would make sense to Cincinnati. They're not going to pay top dollar for a safety. If they didn't pay Von Bell $7 million, a contract he definitely deserved, they're not going to pay Jordan Poyer or some of these other guys more than Von Bell. Maybe, Julian Love would get maybe 2 for 10, something like that, 2 for 12. I mean, something maybe around the Von Bell range. I know he's younger by Von Bell by several years, so maybe he'll get more money than maybe he would originally get with him being younger than Bell. I would not expect him to get more than Bell on average per season, but Julian Love to me makes a lot of sense to Cincinnati, and that's somebody I really think people should be looking at more as we're getting basically in the safety wise, just trying to find safeties who would make sense for Cincinnati. So Julian Love and Taylor Rapp, 2 safeties I would really like the Bengals go after. I would probably prefer Rapp. I think Rapp's better. Julian Love, though, to me makes far more sense. There's still several players to me I would like for the Bengals to go after. I've said this many times. I want the Bengals to go after a backup quarterback. I don't like Brandon Allen. Brandon Allen is not a reliable quarterback. 2, if Burrow were to go down, let's say 3 games, and if we're playing like the Browns, Ravens, Steelers, division rivals who, on our off days, they can totally beat us. I don't believe this Bengals team with Brandon Allen is capable of beating those teams because Brandon Allen is just not good. We need a quarterback, if Burrow goes down, who can, not hurt us, who could just, basically be an average quarterback and not play like complete crap like Brandon Allen has before. Gardner Minshew, Teddy Bridgewater, I know there's a couple of the quarterbacks available. I know Keenum signed with the Texans yesterday. I know some people would want Dalton. I wouldn't really want Dalton. I'd rather have Bridgewater or Minshew. I think at this point in their careers, they're both better than Dalton, but I would definitely like to see the Bengals upgrade at quarterback, a backup quarterback. I know that's something right now I would not expect them to prioritize, especially with, we just lost Von Bell and Jesse Bates. We have a bigger priority than the backup quarterback right now. But maybe once we get closer to the draft, I don't know, maybe a couple weeks from now, if a guy like Minshew or Teddy Bridgewater is still available, maybe then the Bengals would maybe consider getting a backup, a replacement for Brandon Allen to be the backup quarterback for the Bengals. I already kind of mentioned it briefly. Clinton Farrell, I've said this multiple times. I just think it makes a lot of sense. When you look at the Bengals, they could just use a little bit more edge help. Lou Anarumo said, most teams are looking at corners and edge rushers, and they're looking at corners and edge rushers too. We can use some more edge help. Clinton Farrell was coached by the Bengals defensive line coach at Clemson, and it's so weird when you look at the Bengals. The past couple of years they've kind of signed some players who, were bust. Signed players who, were first round picks or top round picks, and up to that point were bust. Apple was terrible up until he signed with Cincinnati. Now he's pretty decent. Hurst was, a bust, up until he signed with Cincinnati. He was not even remotely close to living up to his first round, pick and stuff. His best year by far was Cincinnati. Maybe that, it's the same thing with Farrell. Farrell's been a bust so far too. In 4 years, he has just 10 sacks. But I will be very interested to see if Farrell goes to Cincinnati. I still think of all the outside free agents, I think Clinton Farrell makes the most sense. But with the, with Von Bell leaving Cincinnati, I definitely feel like Julian Love at this point, when you look at our linebacker coach, coached him as a defense coordinator with the Giants, I feel like Julian Love is not far behind on Clinton Farrell, to me, on the list of most likely to become a Bengal outside free agents. It's interesting. Lots of Bengal fans, some of them wanted Bobby Wagner. That was a guy I was kind of, not against, but with the addition of Jermaine Pratt, there's no way it's going to happen. Taylor Lewan's still available. We should not sign Taylor Lewan. I just don't get why people want him. It does not make any sense. He's too injury prone. And our offensive line last year had so many injuries. You add Taylor Lewan to the mix, it's going to just make it 10 times worse. But it's going to be interesting to see what the Bengals do in the next coming days. And like I said, today has been much slower when it comes to news. But it is really interesting, kind of going back to Pete Ryan leaving Cincinnati for Denver. I really thought he was going to end up staying with Cincinnati. It's kind of a surprise there. When you look at, let's see here, Stephon Gilmore got traded to the Cowboys for a fifth round compensatory pick. Watching NFL Network, you would have thought that was like they were trading for DeAndre Hopkins or something like that, like a huge deal. I mean, Stephon Gilmore is good, but he's not what he used to be by any means. But I mean, obviously, people are going to overreact about that, trade. Obviously, because it's the Cowboys and they just love to kiss the Cowboys' butt. But Stephon Gilmore to the Cowboys for a fifth round pick. I just announced like 15 minutes ago. Rodgers is going to be on McAfee show tomorrow at 1. So more than likely, I would say Rodgers would announce where he's going to go, which basically is what I said earlier. He just loves attention and everything. Let's see if there's any more signings here. Alan Lazard to the Packers, to the Jets is just kind of crazy because I feel like that almost kind of confirms Rodgers going to the Jets would just be absolutely wild. Noah Brown signed a 1-year contract with the Texans for 2.6. I actually like that deal a lot. I honestly think that's one of the more underrated signings so far in free agency. Noah Brown was a guy who killed his career highs this year. I mean, he had over 40 receptions. He had 3 touchdowns. He had a decent amount of yards. He really came onto the scene this year for Dallas, and 1 year for 2.6 for Houston, a team who, when you look at Houston, it's really interesting. Brandon Cooks will get traded. It's just a matter of basically when and where. And I cannot remember the other wide receiver they have. He's a free agent as well. So when you look at the returning players for the Texans, they do not have a returning player who had over 500 yards last year for the Texans. And they got Noah Brown. They also signed Robert Woods on a nice deal there. I like that signing a lot. Like both of those, I feel like are really underrated. And Robert Woods was a guy I was kind of wanting the Bengals to get if he was willing to sign a cheap contract because, Zach Taylor was an assistant wide receiver coach with the Rams while Robert Woods was on the Rams team in 2018. The Colts are to release Matt Ryan. That was expected and pretty much just confirms, what everybody else knew, that the Colts are going to draft a quarterback with one of their with the top pick, one of the top picks they have in the first round. Let's see if there's any more moves here. James Bradbury is returning to the Eagles in a 3-year deal worth $38 million. One really interesting move to me that is kind of weird. Jason Kelce signed a 1-year contract with the Eagles. He signed a 1-year contract for $14.5 million. Like, yeah, Jason Kelce's getting up there in age. He's one of the best centers in the league. You can, say he's the best center, and people aren't really going to debate about it. But 14.5 for his age, and you look at all the free agents the Eagles have, that's kind of crazy to me. When you look at, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, a guy who, you would think the Eagles would want to re-sign, you're not going to have as much money to spend on him and re-sign him when Jason Kelce just got a ton of money for a guy who this could very well be his last year. To me, I really thought Jason Kelce was going to sign a cheap deal, maybe like 1 for $5 or something like that, like a home team discount, so they can re-sign some of these guys. When you look at the Eagles, they lost their offense coordinator, they lost their defense coordinator, they're losing players left and right. They lost Hargrave yesterday. They're going to lose several more players. But, after the Super Bowl, people, the Eagles will be back and, stuff like that. But, we lost the Super Bowl, just over a little bit a year ago. The Bengals aren't going to be back to a fluke when we lost nobody. We lost C.J. Uzomah, and people thought we were going to suck. This Eagles team has already lost more than what we did this last year, and people are still hyping them up. I really don't get it. But I was kind of surprised with Jason Kelce not signing cheaper for Philadelphia. That's something that was really kind of a head scratcher to me. Looking at some moves here, I was trying to see if there's any other moves. There's not. Rashawn Penny signed with the Eagles. Let's see here. That's kind of interesting because I would still expect them to re-sign Miles Sanders. That's something else. If Miles Sanders doesn't re-sign with the Eagles, I feel like I mentioned earlier, Josh Jacobs, if he were to get traded, I wouldn't imagine he would since he signed the franchise tag. If he would, I also think the Eagles is a possible destination because he loved to run the ball, and also Josh Jacobs was on the same team with Hurts and Devontae Smith during your time with Alabama. So Josh Jacobs to the Eagles and the Dolphins would make a lot of sense to me. I think the Dolphins would make the most sense because they would have more cap space and playing with Tua, playing with Waddle, and Mike McDaniel. Like I said, he loves to run the ball, but at the moment, there's not really many signings here or anything like that. But it's just kind of crazy, when you're heading into the off season, you were kind of expecting, there's going to be a couple of big moves, but from a Bengals perspective standpoint, you did not think all this was going to be happening just in the first day or so. I mean, everybody knew Jesse Bates was leaving. Outside people, NFL Network, ESPN, you talk, the Bengals aren't going to have money to sign. If the Bengals don't have money to re-sign Jesse Bates, how are they going to have money to re-sign Burrow? I mean, they're not re-signing Bates, so they can have money for Burrow. They can have money for Higgins. They can have money for Chase and some of these other guys. But we all knew Bates was gone. Just Von Bell really surprised me. I mean, Pratt staying surprised me. And then Pirine leaving. Like, that's just really weird to me. I really thought Pirine was going to stay. But, he goes to Denver. And I feel like with Pirine leaving, that's pretty much a guarantee. We're going to see Mixon on this team next year. And I know there's been, all the allegations and stuff. People want him cut. People want him traded. He played absolutely terrible last year. 25% of his rushing yards last season came from the one game against Carolina, which is like a once-in-a-lifetime game for any running back. And, Pirine, and he only started a couple games last year for us, but when he started against the Chiefs back in December, I mean, he had over 100 rushing yards that game when he started. You take away the Panthers game Mixon went off against, he did not have a single regular season game with 100 rushing yards. Including the playoffs, he did have a 100 rushing yard game against Buffalo, but that was it. Like, it's just really crazy. I really thought Mixon was going to have a great year. Obviously, I was not right there. But with Pirine leaving, I feel like that's kind of a confirmation that Mixon will be on this team this upcoming year. So basically, I'm kind of talking about, some free agents the Bengals should target, kind of talking about, what's all happened for Cincinnati so far, whether it's keeping players, whether it's losing players, some of the top moves in free agency today. Kind of talked about, some of the top moves in free agency, what all happened yesterday. But the more we go with this, the more, crazy madness I'm sure will happen, not just with Cincinnati, but just with the whole NFL in general. And then with Rodgers, going to be a McAfee show tomorrow. I'm sure it's going to be crazy, whether if he goes to the Packers, stays with the Packers, or if he goes to the Jets. But yeah, that kind of does it for this video. If you're new to the channel or if you've seen my videos before, I would really, really appreciate it if you could like this video and subscribe. I would really, really appreciate it. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time on the Sports 2 Hein Show.